So hello everyone. Yeah,
Hey.
thank you for coming. Yeah, and I'm really pleased to be here, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Patel Otdelnov. I'm an artist. Can you hear me well? Yeah. I studied at the Surikov Art Institute and later the Institute of Contemporary Art in Moscow. I left Russia because of its growing repressive policies after the start of the war in Ukraine. I've been living and working in London for the past 3 years. I came here on a global talent visa. It's a special visa for artists and maybe talented people in different professions. I'm well known for large-scale projects that explore hidden or suppressed layers of history. My practice combines different media, painting, installation, and video, and archival research as well. I often focus on industrial landscapes, environmental ruins, and the toxic legacy of the Soviet past. Today, I'd like to focus on some of my recent work from 3 projects I've created in London since I've been living here over last 3 years. All of them are united by my attempt to understand how did this war launched by Russia against Ukraine became possible. I began this research with my project Acting Out, a project exploring the broad historical collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. Then I tried to delve deeper and turned inwards to my personal history and the background story of my hometown of Dzerzhinsk in the project called Hometown. My most recent project, A Child in Time, continues this theme by focusing on my childhood and education in a Soviet school. My works relate to different historical backgrounds, and therefore sometimes I have to give you some explanations. Maybe it's not every time very obvious. For Russia, in the current time, the Soviet past has become the idea of the future. The past has come to be where the future should have been. We can clearly see the catastrophes that this has already caused. I would like to share with you some reflections on how this happened and what the basic elements of this idea of the future are, which in reality is reimagining of the past. Now let me turn to my first British project. So in my project Acting Out, as I mentioned before, I ruminate about what made a full-scale aggressive war against a neighborhood state possible. I believe that it is also the war against the future. I think one of the main reasons for this was the idea of a special path and mission. I'll try to explain this in more detail. The official authorities have for many years declared that the nation has a certain historical mission. Russia is a country that has its own special path, but its destination is uncertain. It's just an absurd idea of a unique Russian path and God's chosen route. These ideas were around, but they became much more prevalent after the annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. These ideas, like so-called traditional values, unity of command and patriotism, have been co-opted into a repressive agenda of homophobia, tyranny, and jingoism. Here is an official red carpet leading nowhere. At the same time, it refers to the Soviet avant-garde. And of course, you see the same red carpet in official hall in Kremlin. Now we know that the red carpet inevitably leads to the bunker. It's one of the bunkers in Moscow I visited just before the beginning of this war. You can find some of them. It's quite deep. and I saw red carpets there. Some of them are declassified. The Byzantine throne in the middle of endless snow of the Russian nowhere is an absurd idea of autocracy, the unlimited power of one man. But what gives the autocrat the superpower? It is, of course, nuclear weapons. What looks like an abstract picture actually is a nuclear briefcase, which is at all times near the autocrat. This is a real control panel for the nuclear arsenal. Remember this picture and my briefcase painting. I'll come back to it later. Sorry for silly jokes. I edited maybe for to make it not so boring and not so terrifying. What you see in this painting looks like a globe. This sphere is installed in a children's summer camp near the closed city of Snezhensk in the Urals. This city specializes in the manufacture of nuclear weapons. The sphere was made as a hard metal casing for a thermonuclear bomb called Tsar bomb or Kuzkina Mother, which is the most powerful thermonuclear bomb in the history of mankind. Here you can see the casing. The name Kuzkina Mother appeared after Nikita Khrushchev's bragging words to Richard Nixon in 1959 during the Cold War. We will show you Kuzkina Mother. It means like, we will give you a lesson. 5 similar metal casings were made for this bomb. One of them was blown up on 30th of October 1961 on Novaya Zemlya. It was the largest explosion in human history. Another casing was installed in the children's summer camp near the city of Snezhensk. It is painted like a globe. Children camp, so you can see children camp group photo, just children posing near this globe. Actually, here are the children of nuclear workers of Snezhensk factories. But I'm not sure they know about what is this. It is impossible to understand the turn that has taken place in Russia nowadays without the Nietzschean concept of ressentiment, which is based on the sense of injustice and offense. The outcome of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union are above all seen as injustices. The following works focus on the collapse of the Soviet Empire and the loss of its superpower status. Intercontinental ballistic missiles were deployed in numerous places, scattered throughout the Soviet Union and in the most hidden locations, far from large population centers. After the signing of the Treaty of the Reduction of Strategic Offensive Arms by the Soviet Union and the United States, so-called START 1 in 1991, missiles were destroyed and the missile silos were closed. However, not for a long time. Something happened that forced them to open these silos again. In early 1991, due to the worsening economic crisis in the country, the government decided to undertake unprecedented reforms. On January 22, in 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev signed a decree on the withdrawing all old banknotes from circulation. The initiator of the confiscatory monetary reform was the finance minister Valentin Pavlov. He intended, during using the surprise effect, to carry out ruble reform and thus stabilize the ruble. It was only possible to exchange the old money for the new ones for 3 days, and the maximum amount of exchange was limited to only 1,000 rubles per person. It's about 2 or 3 average salaries. Simultaneously, the government froze all private bank accounts. People's savings disappeared overnight. So after these reforms, in the official bank, there was a huge amount of money that had to be disposed of somehow. First, the Soviet Mint tried to burn it in furnaces, in cement factories. But because of the huge amount of lead in the notes, this was dangerous for workers. Then the banknotes were simply transported to the empty missile silos and buried in them. For example, you can find such silos in the Kostroma region. 8 silos were allocated for written-off banknotes. Such silos filled with Soviet money also in the Ivanovo, Yaroslavl, and Vladimir regions, just 30 meters deep, filled with tons of Soviet money. Yeah. I combined painting and application here, so you see pieces of real Soviet money, paper money here. I have devoted several works to the old generation's nostalgia for the so-called happy Soviet past. In 1985, the song The Beautiful Far Away, which was from the film Guest from the Future, became super popular. The chorus of the song begins with the verse to the future: beautiful far away, don't be cruel to me. Nowadays, this Soviet beautiful far away, the idea of a bright future, is turned into a ridiculous attempt to reanimate the past. The melody of this song was played at my show. Let me show you a video. Yeah, how it was installed at Pushkin House. Piano plays itself without pianist. In Russia, many people, especially the older generation, feel nostalgia for the Soviet Union and its paraphernalia, May Day parades, and Soviet slogans. The current Russian government relies on these people. It creates an image of the beautiful past for them and its propaganda. So the slogans held aloft. Communism is the youth of the world. Next one. Our labor is for you, motherland. Communism is the bright future of humanity. And USSR is the bulwark of peace. And this is the painting with a concrete wall. Actually, they are standing opposite to this wall, just facing it. The wall has become a real symbol of Putin's Russia, the symbol of bans, restrictions, and isolation from the surrounding hostile world. A kind of new Iron Curtain. The panel of the time machine from the movie Guest from the Future today looks like a monument of retrofuturism. Here you see stills from this film. It was the way to go to the bright future in the movie. Here are stills from it. And can you see it? It's written, please not in 2025. Here is the boy traveling through time. I painted this gadget. It is the last painting of my show. By the way, do you remember what was one of the first nuclear briefcase? Exactly, the control panel. This control panel remind us the panel of nuclear briefcase. Here are they together. So, and it was like a ronda or composition of my show. The beginning with the one nuclear briefcase and the end with this control panel of time machine. So the nuclear briefcase is also a kind of time machine, like the most radical way to fight against the future. Now I would like to move on from the topics of the special path and the struggle against the future to a more personal thing. I would like to show you some of the works from my poignant project Hometown. I exhibited this project a year ago at a half-abandoned old waiting room at Peckham Rise Station in London. Now let me show you a short video. Like a small tool. I devoted the hometown project to my hometown of Dzержinsk. 3 generations of my family worked at the chemical plants of the city. So let me give you some background. Here's the landscape with a blue dog. During Second World War, Dzержinsk factories, Dzержinsk is my hometown, Dzержinsk factories produced chemical weapons and in peacetime, raw materials for various sectors of the national economy. And of course, they produced chemical waste. In the 1990s, the factories passed into private ownership, some later becoming decrepit. However, the reservoirs of toxic waste lay untouched, steadily poisoning the surrounding area. One of these called the black hole. And by the way, the blue dog is not just an imaginary. Here's the article on BBC. It's written in February 2021, several stray dogs with bright blue fur were spotted near an abandoned chemical plant in Dzержinsk. Experts believe the dog's fur turned blue after exposure to chemicals like copper sulfate at the site. I really hope these dogs are alive. It is a self-portrait of me at the age of 7. It's based on a photograph from 1986 when I was wearing my school uniform for the very first time, just before starting school. On my way to school, I used to walk past rows of garages. The doors were painted in all sorts of colors. People used whatever spray paint they could find. I think people also wanted to show a bit of individuality this way. Here is my photo in 1986. Back then, garages were more than just places to keep cars. They were like men's clubs. After work, men would spend all their free time there. And it was their own space, a place of freedom. I loved the garages then, and I still do. This is a group portrait of my family in our backyard with the same garages. They're like ghosts in my painting. This is how the exhibition space looked like. Here's the portrait of my grandmother at her workshop, which is now abandoned or maybe even destroyed. So my granny built this workshop herself, and she was working there for more than 30 years. It was a plexiglass workshop, plexiglass production. And she returns back there as a ghost. When I was a child, I lived in the same room with my granny, and she raised me strictly. Very often I heard from her sayings similar to the one I found on the wall in her workshop. You are the host and not a guest. Take care of every nail. Soviet slogans can be found in many of the workshops of these plants. For example, this one, forward to the victory of communism. Exactly, communism has never won, and the shop is becoming a ruin. Sometimes the architecture of Soviet facilities, factory facilities, even being in ruins, expresses the idea of the future, like this one. Everything beautiful on earth and all good things are from humans. An absurd slogan that is unimaginable today when we realize the damage that man is doing to the environment. But it's a real slogan. I found it myself in one of the factories. An iconic Soviet figure Valentina Tereshkova, the first female cosmonaut in 1963, who then became a Russian MP. In 2020, when discussing amendments to the Russian constitution in the State Duma, Tereshkova proposed to remove the restrictions on the number of presidential terms. Do you know what it means? Now Putin exactly can be president forever. Thus, the icon of the Soviet future has done a lot to destroy the future of modern Russia. Streets in many Soviet cities, including Dzerzhinsk, are named after her. A mural with her portrait was preserved on one of the prefabricated concrete houses on Tereshkova Street. It is in this painting, you can notice some wooden houses, the painting by Alexei Frolov. Before it became a street, it was a small village called Solovki after the Solovetsky Gulag camp. It was called this because there were many former prisoners and exiles lived there. Here is my painting with this mural. And she is like a goddess here, like a Soviet goddess. Here is another work from the Hometown Project, in which the Soviet symbol of sickle and hammer has become a ghost. In current Russia, it is not a ghost of communism, but a ghost of the Soviet past that has replaced the future. Here is another reference to Soviet times. I usually follow social media accounts of factories and people in Dzerzhinsk. About a year and a half ago, I saw a video from a meeting with the mayor of the city. He spoke about the city's great successes, profits, and benefits, and people just applauded. Why benefits? Because of the war and because they produce something for this. It returns back to life this way. And there were no arguments, no debates, just like in Soviet times. Some works in Hometown are dedicated to street gangs of Dzerzhinsk. In 1990s, Dzerzhinsk was divided between youth gangs. Each gang controlled its own area of the city, with its streets, discos, schools, and colleges. You can imagine it was really dangerous to live there at that time. Some streets joined together to form alliances. They helped them hold more territory and fight rivals. The gang had their own rules, leaders, and I want to emphasize this. For the members, it was important to be loyal. In many ways, they resembled a shadow version of the Soviet system, with strict hierarchy, control, and discipline. Many gang members became soldiers in Russia's wars and Soviet wars, in Afghanistan and Chechnya, and later some moved into business and politics. And they didn't disappear in 2000s. They simply entered official roles. But they brought the same values with them, like us and them, separation for we and them, no discussion, being hostile to outsiders, just hate them. This idea spread into the wider society. Gang logic became part of how things work. So the past returned, not as memory, but as the framework of the present. In a way, the future that came after the Soviet collapse has already rehearsed in a violent course of these gangs the post-Soviet present was born from this distorted echo of the Soviet. The idea of this work, which is above all the show abyss, came to me in 2022 after I felt if something terrifying had taken the place of the sun. It hung all over everything I loved. The black vortex became the image that matched exactly my sense of the unfolding catastrophe. And it's over my hometown. Now I'd like to turn to the last part, my recent project, A Child in Time, which I made as a continuation of Hometown. I dedicated it to my Soviet childhood in the 1980s, a time of perestroika and deep anxiety. I remember long queues for bread, civil defense license at my school, and the fear of nuclear war, especially after the Chernobyl disaster in '86. I recreated my first school primer, which is actually ABC book, where each letter carried ideological meaning. I replaced Soviet images with ones reflecting my real fears. This project is my way of understanding how early Soviet indoctrination still echoes in Russia today. My kindergarten was built in 1960. I came across a newspaper article from that time describing how a beautiful and well-equipped nursery had opened its doors to 125 children of workers from the local factory. Among them was my father. His family had moved to Dzerzhinsk from a workers' settlement that same year. Years later, I attended the same kindergarten, and a few years after me, so did my younger brother. Could you find me there? The factory, which built the kindergarten for its workers, went bankrupt in the late 1990s and by the early 2000s. And the kindergarten had been abandoned. At the same time, the city was experienced a demographic decline. There were fewer children, and the nursery was no longer needed. Fires were lit on sight, windows were smashed. Each time I returned to Dzerzhinsk, I visited the crumbling building, which reminded me of wartime ruins. And since 2022, I have seen thousands of images of destroyed buildings, among them kindergartens, destroyed by the terrible war in Ukraine. Although these ruins cannot be directly compared, and it's even not ethically correct to try, yet perhaps both have become part of the same catastrophe, one that has grown on an unimaginable scale and crossed borders. My kindergarten was finally demolished recently. This painting depicts Lenin Square in my hometown of Dzerzhinsk, as I remember it in my childhood, with the Palace of Pioneers in the background. I attended various clubs in this palace, but the one I stayed in the longest was the astronomy club. I remember how we set up telescopes right there on the square, only to end up looking not at the stars, but at Lenin's bald head covered in dirt dropping. Monuments to Soviet leaders were part of a grand plan for monumental propaganda. They can be found everywhere across the post-Soviet urban space. Lenin was omnipresent, On the first and last pages of my school book primer, in the central squares of every city, in the names of the main streets. His portrait hung above the blackboard in every classroom. Even the first book I read by myself in kindergarten was about him. Only many years later, I learned about the Red Terror, which was organized by Lenin, and how cruel he was with people who disagreed with him. The kind Lenin, who was shown as a friend of children with the kind eyes on his portraits, turned out to be a harsh leader, ready to sacrifice anything for and anyone for his ideas. I can't quite explain why I wanted to turn his head into a black vortex. The socialist ideals of equality and justice still seem beautiful to me, but Lenin's monuments are not monuments to socialism. Now I see them as symbols of the willingness to sacrifice human lives and to be sacrificed in turn. Perhaps even the pioneer motto. By the way, do you know what was the pioneer motto? Yeah. Be ready, always ready, was in the end about that very readiness to be sacrificed. Some of the work for this project I dedicated to Soviet TV. We have no time to tell about all of them. I'll give you a backstory for one. Do you know who is this guy? No, no family. Anatoly Kashpirovsky was a Soviet hypnotist and healer who became famous in the late 1980s for his TV sessions. Millions of people watched him, amazingly believing he could cure them through the screen. His popularity reflected the growing interest in mysticism during Perestroika era. But he was definitely a manipulative charlatan. Kashpirovsky first appeared on Soviet television in 1989. He held only 6 so-called healing sessions. These are programs aired during prime time, right after the evening news. But their impact was enormous. Millions of viewers sat silently in front of their screens, hoping to be cured through hypnosis and eye contact. For a short time, he became a national phenomenon, mixing science, mysticism, and performance. Mikhail Ninashev, the chairman of Soviet state television and radio of that time, later admitted, during my time, when there was extreme political tension and frustration, we introduced several programs meant to soothe people. Anatoly Kashpirovsky, Alan Chumak. But very soon we had to stop Kashpirovsky's show because it became clear that it was pure fraud. So the idea was to help pacify the audience in a time of social change and anxiety. Now I want to turn to the last part of my talk and say a few words about my recent work, the main part of the project A Child in Time, called Primer. One day recently, I found a copy of my school primer or ABC book from 1986. It felt as I had accidentally assessed the basic settings in my mind. Each letter was paired with a word that carried ideological weight, like this letter Z, which was paired with the word звезда, star, and znamя, flag, in the sense of a state banner. My primer created a world where the words of Soviet ideology felt as as natural as household words. For example, you see here three stars. One star is on the Kremlin, another star is on the sea bottom, and the third is just geometrical star, like pentagram. So it's just there is no difference between nature and ideology. And the syllables in a primer, sometimes they recall me books of futurists, Russian futurists. For example, this book by Khrushchev. On the right side, you see my primer, and it's written just syllables: mya, sia, nya, bya, rya, bya, ля, дя, вя, тя, зя. And there is no sense in this. And the same way of poetry, the poetry of 1910s by futurists. Дыр, булшил, оберщур, скум, вы, со, бы, р, л, з. So there is no sense, it's just some syllables. And I think it looks like there's a connection here between, not real connection exactly. And it feels like there were no real words, or like they were not allowed, just as the word war is banned in Russia today. You cannot just call the war as the war. I imagined what my Soviet primer would have looked like if it showed the things that really mattered to me and sometimes scared me when I was a child. So the letter Z became the word zima, winter, leading to nuclear winter, paired with an image of children in gas masks. These children are taken from Konstantin Lopukhansky's film. It's a still from his film, Dead Man's Letters, a vision of nuclear apocalypse. And I recreated my Soviet school primer, one where these schoolboys' most immediate fears were war, death in a bomb shelter, and of course, radiation. I already told you about the controversial figure of Lenin. Actually, he was everywhere. And here's me on the right. And on the main Soviet festival, reciting a poem. And here you can see the flags of colonized countries, Soviet republics. Some of the pages in my primer concern militarization, like this one, fascists are burning. It's written, related to my own drawing at the age of 5. Here's the drawing. Here you can see the deep roots of the idea of the enemy and his dehumanization. They're fascists, not human beings, and it's okay to enjoy burning them. So it's scary. Here are little toy soldiers, which I played with. Real heroes ready to throw their grenades. Readiness to kill and, of course, to die. You can see it just in these particular soldiers. And this basis they're standing on, it looks like a small grave hill for me. So it reminds me a grave hill, like it's he's going to die. And they were similar throughout the whole Soviet Union. You can find it anywhere. Here's a group portrait of soldiers on a parade shouting, "Hurrah!" And AU as well. Do you know what does it mean? AU. It's like help when you are in the forest and you're lost in the forest. So I found the same combination in my primer. In my childhood, there were thousands of playgrounds like this with rockets. This is a photography by my friend Ivan Mikhailov. It is a rocket ready to fly to space. An image of the future, exactly. But it's backhanded because at the same time, it's a rocket targeting other countries. This project is my way of unrevealing the ideas I learned from my first years at the Soviet school. The Soviet future has imagined as radiant, scientific, and inevitable, like a rocket on a playground, always propelled forward. But this future was built on silence, fear, and the ever-present image of the enemy. I redrew my primer to make it personal, showing my inner world. I believe that many late Soviet children share the same fears and dreams, though some of them later became politicians and ideologists. Today I see how that mythical utopia has turned into resentment, aggression, and violence. The dream of the past future has become a nightmare that repeats itself on a loop. Nostalgia for the past times poisons the real future. It's even been the cause of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which has already lasted for more than 3 years. Oh. So now it's time to say thank you for your attention. So more information about my project you can find on my website, and please follow my social media as well. And yes, here's the link to my website. You can see my previous projects there, which may be more serious, more related to historical research, like Pромzona and Ringgit Trace. So thank you one more time, and if you have any questions, I would love to try to answer.
Do you have any optimism for the future? Was that the microphone?
Just leave it
Oh.
No, thank you for this personal question. I do, yeah.
Oh, good.
I do, despite all the things we know, yeah, I feel optimism. Yeah, please, that's all.
there. Sorry, go on, I've been like, yeah.
It's okay.
Thank you. I'm curious about one of your paintings where you have, I think the title was Happy Past, or a Note to the Happy Past, where you have all the women standing in the line with the postcards and balloons. And I'm curious why there are only women, there are no children and there are no men. So I was wondering if you could tell us more about that particular painting.
Yeah, actually, it was this painting was related to my own impressions once I visited my hometown of Dzержinsk, and it was a new holiday. You know, there is a new holiday called the Day of Elderly People. They celebrate it as all Soviet holidays at one time, and it was the main palace hall for chemists in Dzержinsk, and in that hall they were only women, maybe 90% women. I don't know why. Maybe men at this age are just they're dying earlier. I don't know. And on the scene there were just women, maybe a few men, maybe all the performances were with women only. And it's really so. Men are just dying earlier than they became old, especially in small cities like my hometown.
Yes, I'm intrigued by your analysis of Russia, and I can't help thinking that a lot of it would also apply to other parts of the world, particularly what's happened in America, with this sort of nostalgia for a so-called great past. And there are people over here, politicians, who want us to believe that we should go back to a so-called golden era. So I think it's possibly not just Russia where this is happening.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. This topic is familiar for me because of I'm talking about things I know from my childhood, and I can tell you more about my own country. And the same processes you can find them in nowadays United States and here in Europe as well. And but I think I'm not an expert in this field here to make the same project about maybe conservative ideas of Britain. Maybe in years I'll do it, but not now because I'm not so familiar with this here. But I have like my own door into history, into my family history. Through my family history, I have my own door into this background of Russia. That's why I'm talking about that. And there's another reason. It seems that unfortunately, Russia is one of the first in this terrible process of turning right and turning to conservatism. And the United States is following. And that's terrible.
Did you feel you had to censor any slides?
Repeat, please.
I wonder if
Censor.
you felt you had to censor.
Censor.
Yeah, yourself for your own security.
It's hard to say. It seems it seems that I'm doing things I want to do, and I always was. But maybe there's very deep censorship. I don't know. If I find it, of course, I will just try to work something about to make something about this inner censorship. But it seems I feel I'm trying to be free with my works and as an artist.
So do you think that by highlighting this in your art, you're making the attempt that you individually could make to sort of slow the juggernaut? What do you think the purpose of your art is? Is it simply a creative expression of your past, or is it are you expressing political views? Are you hoping that by highlighting it that you're part of the movement to try and turn this, what feels like an inevitable and destructive future around? Because your premise seems to be we hark back to a golden past which never really existed, but we always, the past is golden. We use that to inform the future that we're trying to create. We use that to control the population. We use that then to move forwards through force. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to, I'm thinking on, as it were. What is the purpose of what you're doing, or what do you see yourself doing?
Yeah, I got it. Thank you for the question. I would say that the purpose is to invite people for rumination, to think about these difficult topics. Sometimes it's very obvious who is on the right side and who is on the wrong side. But if you are talking like me, talking from very controversial side, as Russian, as a person who from inside of this particular society, in this particular period of time, terrible period of time, this aggressive war against another state, with casualties every day. And I think it's very important maybe to learn something from this point of view. I think this point of view is important, and there's a lot to discuss here about what bring this to life, what made this catastrophe happen. I think my works and my recent projects are just an invitation for this conversation.
Another question. I noticed that your paintings. I noticed that the paintings, when you show them from afar, there's this, very neat, organized architecture. And then as you start zooming in, there's always something not quite right. There are broken windows and, there's something smearing. So you really get to know, you kind of get sucked into this kind of hopelessness or a slight kind of, degradation of how things were once, because at one point they would have been new. But I just wonder, how is your work received in Russia? Because it's not just about the past that has decayed somehow, but it's also about trying to go back to something that doesn't exist and may not even be that, well, it's not even that desirable. How do people in the country that have to live there view it and receive it? And does it cause, does it trigger people to reflect and change the way they might perceive things?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's very important question and the topic, how to deal with people there. And I've done project called Promzona, which was related to these factories of my hometown, and it was a huge project. And I've made several, maybe 8 exhibitions in Russia, different cities, and near my hometown as well, in Nizhny Novgorod, there were 2 exhibitions. And some of the ex-workers of the factories visited my shows there. And we had some discussions there. And for some people, it was quite offensive, maybe, to talk about maybe not the bright side of this. Once I heard the question, why not to make a project about a theater, factory theater, which was amazing, and why it's about maybe something sad, why not to make it about this or that. And I am really enjoy these questions, because I think these questions are help people to reflect what was important for them at that time. But other visitors of that, from these workers of the factories, they say that it's very important you remember about us and you're telling the stories which are related to us. We feel we exist. We feel that for us it's just an existence, and our life, we are not in vain. But of course, I'm trying to make something very different to local museums, like local factory museums. They always tell stories of the achievements with main workers, not the workers, but directors, heads of the factories, and maybe main engineers. but not about simple people just working there. I tried to make it about just ordinary people, and I had my own door into this history. All my 3 generations of my family were workers of these chemical plants in Dzerzhinsk, and of course, I started my project interviewing them, and I made some films related to these interviews, based on these interviews. And it was a big conversation. It started, for me, it was a big conversation. It started for me with my project from Zona. And then I turned to another project, Ring and Trace, which was related to some events, catastrophe events happened in Urals on plutonium production, atomic production. There was, for example, it was an explosion in 1957, and it was a huge explosion like Chernobyl before Chernobyl, and it was classified and no one knew about that. It was impossible to even to speak about that. People signed disclosure agreements, and I made an exhibition there in Urals, just to make a space, to create a space for discussions, to talk about this sensitive topic. And I think it's a role of the artist to make this space for discussion, for reflections. And I think the problem of what happened in Russia is there was no reflection, or just to praise something. Let's praise our past, our glorious past.
There's one question online as well.
What leaps out, certainly to me and perhaps to all of us, is how incredibly brave you are. And brave to take your work into Russia as well, because it is clear what you're saying, and from what we all can understand, it is very much a culture of yay, 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 and not the shadow, not the dark, not the danger, and not the death. And your blue dog, for example, you know, how many people have been gravely infected and affected by that? And as you asked, you know, do you ever feel that threat yourself? And that what you do is incredibly brave.
Thank you for this. Not so brave. I left my country because of it was real danger of the prison, because even for expressing your opinion about this war, you can be jailed.
Mm.
And I decided to leave the country when they launched new laws, and somebody, the deputy Alexei Gorinov, was jailed for this law, just for expressing his opinion. I decided that I have to leave the country.
So you haven't taken your work back, or you have taken your work back? Have you taken exhibitions into Russia or before, or do you take them in now, or can you send your exhibitions in with other people, or do you just exhibit in the UK and other countries?
Now I exhibit in the UK and in Europe, but some of the works from my previous projects are still there in Russia. And for example, this project, the Ring and Trace I mentioned, which is about the catastrophes on Ural related to plutonium factories, is still there. It's still open.
Oh, good.
It's but it's somewhere far away. It's the forests. You have to go there for hours.
Yeah.
And this hidden place, maybe that's why it's
That's
still
why you're
there.
still alive. Well
Yeah.
done.
But our policies, they built a new checkpoint. You cannot just go there,
Oh,
especially with the foreign passport. So it's restricted. They made new restrictions
to make sure you don't see it.
it's hard, but it's still there. It still exists, and people from these cities, closed cities, are coming, and they still
Good.
it still works.
Yeah. So, an interesting question for me that you brought up was this idea of nostalgia. So that the golden past that we hark back to that no longer is, and you in your work are suggesting perhaps, anyway, but it's, the question I wanted to ask was around how we treat, we all suffer from nostalgia, regardless of where we come from. We all have this idea of a gilded past, and it's how we use that to possibly go forward into a future not in a way to say we wish to recreate that past by using force or using violence to create the past we believe happened, i.e. the Soviet state collapsed, Gorbachev capitulated, Putin, am going to create this state again because it was an anathema to the Russian people that the USSR collapsed. But I don't actually really even wish to make it personal to Russia, but how one takes nostalgia, that human emotion, and uses it to create a positive future, rather than using it as a vehicle to create war or aggression in order to try and recreate empire or recreate a past.
I think there's an answer in your question. So you told about the nostalgia, and of course, nostalgia is an emotion. It's very ordinary emotion, and that's fine if you feel nostalgia for something, for your childhood or something else. But it's when it's a politic. It's just a plan. Nostalgia is a plan. It's another thing. If you want to return back something, make America great again, it's of course it's nostalgia which destroys the future. It's another thing.
So your
When nostalgia
attitude,
is just a feeling, it's just your personal.
feeling.
It's okay, yeah, but if it's going to politics,
But nostalgia is all pervasive, isn't it? So you would say nostalgia is something which is fundamentally corrosive to the human psyche. Or would you say it's a neutral emotion and it's how we respond to our feeling of nostalgia?
yeah, I think the second one, yeah, because of course, I'm talking about how toxic nostalgia could be and the danger of nostalgia as well. But nostalgia as the feeling as an emotion could be just if it's your personal feeling, that's fine.
But
It's
personal is always in the collective psyche. We will all with any cultural grouping there will be a collective nostalgia as well as a personal nostalgia. And for me, your works really invite ideas around what nostalgia does and how we respond to it collectively as well as personally.
Yeah, that's true. It's about collective nostalgia. It's about this this came from inside, from personal. It came to policy. It came to just a statement of the state.
Yes, because it's the exploitation of a collective nostalgia of the elderly is how you actually.
Yeah, it's danger.
So just one question from, well, there are two, but we're only going to do one, so haven't got time, so we've got to finish with this. From an online viewer. Now that you're in exile, the condition that echoes throughout history, from the philosopher's ship onwards, how does this experience of exile differ for your generation of artists?
How it changed, how it differs from that steamship, yeah, from philosophical steamship. I think the question is about the philosophical steamship of 1920-21. It was after the revolution. I think it's very different because of now we live in a transparent world. People in Russia can see my translation just now and nowadays, and maybe some of them are watching this from from another countries, from Russia and from Georgia. So it's much more transparent, and we can keep our contacts. We can follow each other. And in 100 years ago, it was another situation. It was maybe like, let's create our own bubble. Let's make Russia outside of Russia, and they done that. So it still exists. Maybe our generation is very different. We are trying to integrate to be part of new societies. But maybe in my own experience, my own projects are related with this. So I'm trying to tell about my background. It was important for me. It was crucial for me to make this kind of introduction and to tell about the topics I'm really familiar with. Maybe now I can turn to something else. So it was like something finished.
So I think we're going to stop there.
Thank you so much.